Hey, what's up, guys? Paul Naschy. I always tell you I'm a big fan of Paul Naschy. His real name is Jacinto Molina. And I remember this book. I got this a while ago. Memoirs of a Wolfman. This was kind of like his, yeah, that's what it says. Midnight Marquee Press. These guys are great. I don't know if they still exist, but man, small publishing, small press in America, man, they did so many of these books on even the most obscure classic horror, very in depth. I think they're still around. I have to look it up, but this was great, man. This was from 2000 or no, 97. He wrote this. He was having a bit of a comeback, as an older man doing like horror cinema in Spain. There was a time where that was a thing again, but just a fascinating time period in his lifespan. He was born in Spain during the Spanish Civil War. His family was divided. His father, someone said he was a fascist. So people came to his house with guns to get him, right? Some communists. He jumped out the back on his motorcycle and escaped. And he didn't see his dad again until the war was over a year later. And his father came back in a captured Republican tank. The Soviet, I think T-26s. And he saw his dad come out of the tank. And that's when he saw him again. So it was interesting. And is his dad. Apparently he's a Basque. He's a mixture of some Basque descent, but just interesting growing up. Very literate. Knows all his both literary and his love of film. I never saw that. That was cool, right? But pretty much as a kid after the war in the horrible Franco Spain, which is always brought up as a horrible thing, he liked the escapism of going to the cinema with his father, and he saw the movie that changed his life. One of my favorite, actually, that and The Black Cat are like my two favorite Universal horror films. But the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. There you go. There's Lugosi. His one time as the Frankenstein's monster, and of course, Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. Great. I love this fucking movie, dude. Excuse my language. And it inspired him later. Right? What's cool is it shows him growing up, and he's not like he's kind of like. He's like a nerdy kid, but he's not. He's an athlete. He becomes an athlete. Particularly, he becomes. I don't know if they had powerlifting. They just called it weightlifting back then. But he seemed to be more of the power lifter. A very powerfully built man. Very physical. But he wrote scripts. He had the idea of becoming a script writer for films, and of course his favorite were horror films. But as usual, what was found, especially in Spain, was there was no one willing to put up money for that, and nobody, if they did, all the money would have to go to some foreign actor because no one thought Spanish films could be anything. So basically, the story of Paul Naschy is originally writing the scripts and then having to play the werewolf, playing Waldemar Daninsky, in which he played maybe like 13 films of the reluctant, tragic werewolf. And that's really, there's a theme. Oh boy. Not for children. There's a theme of a lot of his stories because he had to struggle a lot. And there's some really interesting stories of him, the dealing with directors, dealing with money people, dealing with, of course, the worst of all, the critics afterwards. Okay? Now, he doesn't like La Furia del Hombre Lobo, right? La Furia del Hombre Lobo. I know how to speak a little Spanish, come on. But The Fury of the Wolfman, they used to show this on Channel 9 all the time. This movie was crazy. This was a great film. He didn't like it, though, the director, but, I'm not trying to get into the individual films as much as it's just interesting. Spanning his career, making a lot of these films during the Franco regime. Oh my God! Apparently, that wasn't a problem. Okay, the co-productions where he actually ended up in the '80s going to Japan, and he made a bunch of crazy films with the Japanese. It was a Human Beast. They actually had this. I saw this on video cassette, the print. There's like a hitman, hangs out with, hides with this family who turn out to be, cannibals. The Beast of the Magic Sword, where Voldemort Naschy goes to Japan. Cool movies, man. Cool movies. Recommend a book. He's Ultimo Kamikaze. I've never. Look at that. Anyway, some people say that Paul Naschy was very bitter, and he describes that, and that's what I really like, because I'm bitter too. I'm a bitter fucking guy too. Excuse my language. He talks about how that inspired a lot of his films. Okay, where the number of characters, like the sympathetic characters, and he did a lot. He did a lot of sympathetic monster characters. Okay? Characters like Wolfgang Goethe, right? The El Jorobado del Amor, right? The Hunchback of the Moor, which is great. I mean, most of his films I like. Even the ones I don't like as much are still good. Voldemort Naschy, his Dracula, right? These are creatures with no future who share both my own bitterness and the cinematic ostracism to which they are subjected by the poisoned pens of frustrated and envious individuals. Right? However, all these alter egos, whether of my own creation or borrowed, will outlive us all, friend and foe alike, because they have been immortalized on celluloid. Yeah, it's just, I would recommend this. I mean, if you're into, the Spanish horror, I keep saying, is the grisliest, craziest Euro horror. And a lot of it comes out of the beginning, the bad blood that came from the Civil War. Interesting thing at the end that ended out, and of course, as he mentions when the he mentions when the film industry changed. Obviously, Franco died in '74. Last Moon, right? This is the end here. The Fangoria Convention in '97, right? I'll never forget the warmth and affection with which I was greeted at the Fangoria Convention in New York when I had the chance to meet my American friends for the first time. I met him. I actually was nervous. I interrupted him when he was walking with his two sons, and I talked to him, and they spoke English, and he signed something I had. He was really cool, man. I'll never forget seeing him. Really cool guy. Like I said, he passed away of cancer in 2009. I remember when I saw that. It was a period of time in my life which it just got over something really horrible, and then I read that he had died, and I remember I was struck with the sadness of it. But like I said, he brings up here the animosity which I've been subjected, right? In '82, the socialists are coming back, right? And this was appointed general director of cinematography by the Socialist Party, who obviously were now in control. Okay, I guess Franco didn't, I guess he wasn't a totalitarian enough and got rid of his enemies, huh? So because he joined up her new and infamously biased laws for the regulation of Spanish cinema, right? So everything was politically slanted to the left, and it's all corrupt. I mean, Hollywood is corrupt as hell, huh? But it was interesting how he felt like this. Of course, what is this genre that the socialists and such despise the most, despite what Rue Morgue would have you think? It was horror. It was the fantastical, right? It appeals to other feelings. It appeals to traditions. It appeals to gothic, romantic sensibilities, which serve no function in helping, social causes, perhaps. Yeah. And he mentions that, which made it difficult. Later on, of course, he started making more. He started making films. As an older man, he was in. I remember. I think in the early 2000s, he was there. So anyway, great book. Memoirs of a Wolfman, Paul Naschy, Jacinto Molina. Man, rest in peace, man. You were great. So, some of the films that are, of his, in terms of, like I said, the sympathetic monster. Okay, now the monster wasn't a goody two shoes. The monster would kill people. But like I said, in the Spanish films in particular, some of the most evil acts, some of the most nastiest, sadistic acts that are done by people, and the evil of humans in a lot of these, movies, it always comes through. Right? So Hunchback of the Morgue is great. He's a hunchback that works in a hospital morgue, and the young woman who's dying, who he cares for, she passes away, and then he runs into he goes to pay his last respects to her body and finds, the morgue workers like messing with her body. Yeah, these are heavy films. And they make fun of him, and he butchers them, and then he ends up getting blackmailed by scientists, and he has to kidnap people for experiments. But it's really nasty, violent film. I'll take another one, of course, the Valdemar Daminsky movies. Werewolf, Shadow, i.e. Werewolf versus the Vampire Women. The Curse of the Devil, Fear of the Wolfman, which he didn't like, but I think this is great. And my absolute favorite one of all, the one that everyone rips on, the one that I also saw at my grandparents' house, Assignment Terror. This is actually my favorite Valdemar Daminsky movie, and he's actually not even a main character in it. He's like a supporting character, but it's a monster mash. A universal like monster dream of them actually fighting each other really good. Obviously Frankenstein versus the Wolfman. It's a big thing. In all his films, his wolf character usually ends up fighting another monster in addition to humans. Of course, Dracula's Great Love. They showed this on Channel 5 near the end of the time when they were showing genre films. I remember they showed this on Channel 5 at night. It was like in 85 or 86. It was near the end when they decided that instead of showing any genre films or kung fu movies, we'll show infomercials. That was the late 80s. That was a great time, especially we didn't have cable in Brooklyn where I was until 93. So anyway, but in this one you have probably the most sympathetic Dracula you've ever seen in a film. And so those are just some of the recommendations of his. There's films where he's not sympathetic, and they're really good ones too, like Horror Rises from the Tomb, where he plays basically Gilda Ray's come back, and of course The Vengeance of the Mummy, where he's just an evil mummy, and movies where he's like the supporting character, like he's a creepy gravedigger in this, who's like a red herring. So yeah, Paul Naschy, man. You can check him out later.